So just for a few minutes, we're going to look at forensic anthropology. That's my field. If there's a police crime scene, when do they call in forensic anthropologists? I don't know. There's a lot of crime shows on television. CSI, the popularity is kind of waning now. But the answer is only if there are human bones or unidentified human remains. So it's used by police when skeletal remains are found, or in this case, where maybe just a skull was found. What happened to this person? Well, it's pretty obvious, gunshot wound to the head. But what can forensic anthropologists tell by looking at bones? Well, we can tell if bones belong to a male or female, usually tell age, and sometimes we can tell ethnicity. And I'm going to do a whole lecture and show you bones, and you're going to have some case studies to do dealing with human osteology and or forensic anthropology. Because don't forget, even if you're at an archaeological dig, you're going to come across bodies. Egypt, ancient Indus, wherever. And you need to tell male from female, how old the person was, and all that good stuff. What I specialize in is mass fatalities to help identify victims. And the question is, okay, what's a mass fatality? How do you define it? Does anybody know? Well, I'll tell you. The true definition of a mass fatality means when the number of people who died, now people who were injured, mass casualties. Mass fatalities has to do with dead people. When the amount of the dead exceeds the number of bodies the local coroner or medical examiner's office can handle. The other thing you need to know is, just so you know, a coroner is an elected official, a medical examiner is a doctor. In most states now, we are going to a medical examiner system. Just so you know, in Alaska, there's one medical examiner office. It's right on the corner of Boniface and Tudor. And we have 3 doctors now. I worked there for about 6 years. And so these are doctors. The reason why we're getting away from the coroner system is because they're elected officials and they have to worry about being elected, so they're going to rule sometimes in the favor of popularity rather than the medical evidence. Okay, so what my job entails when I get called out by the federal government is plane crashes, mass fatalities. I am a former member of DMORT, which stands for the Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team. So this is a federal agency. I'm an asset of the federal government, get called out whenever there are mass disasters. My specialty was forensic anthropology. If you're looking at the patch here, you will see the little scales. That stands for forensic pathologists. The bird is actually funeral directors. You have forensic odontology or dentistry. You have the computer experts, because we have a computer program, fingerprints. And the very bottom, the skull with the calipers, is actually representing the forensic anthropologists. While I'm doing this lecture, it is actually the night of the 16th. I'm actually leaving tomorrow. I'm getting deployed to the inauguration of President Obama in Washington, D.C. I now belong to what's called the IRCT. And so I get sent out ahead of time just in case there are any mass fatalities or mass casualties, in this case due to some kind of terrorist incident. Okay, just so you know, the federal government has 3 portable morgues that can be flown or moved anywhere they're needed. So in the case of mass fatalities, let's say a plane crashed in Anchorage, realistically, the medical examiner's office could handle maybe 20 bodies at the most. Plane goes down, our facilities here are going to be taxed. So what would happen is the state would request federal assistance from DMORT. So here, what you're seeing in these pictures are, first of all, the pallet that has all the stuff that they need. All we need is a warehouse, and you can see, or a big airplane hangar or something like that, and we'll set up actual stations for each of the disciplines. So here you have where human remains would be examined. They would go from station to station with the whole purpose of being identified. Here is a picture actually from Hurricane Katrina of human remains inside the garbage can. And like I said, you'll see more about this as we go on through the semester. The other thing that forensic anthropologists do is work in the field of human rights. So places like Yugoslavia, Guatemala, Rwanda, Kosovo, I already said that. We're going to see some from Iraq now. So this is a case study from Guatemala from 1982, and basically, according to testimony, 70 men accused of guerrilla activities were murdered. And then, supposedly, government forces went into the same village and killed 80 women and 100 children by bringing them to the top of the mountain and assassinated, excuse the typo. And then the bodies were thrown into a ravine. The testimony from other villagers were that not only did they kill women and children, but they raped the women, and some of the women were even pregnant that they killed. Well, when the government was asked about this, of course they said, well, we never killed women and children. We would never do that. So fast forward 10 years, there's an organization called Physicians for Human Rights, and they actually did an exhumation of the grave, and what they found is the bones were all disarticulated, meaning they were spread apart due to erosion and scavenging by animals. The way most people died was blows to the head, blows to the neck, and the remains, mostly women, had no textiles, meaning no clothes, which infers rape. You can't tell rape on human bones, but it did support that theory. And here you actually have evidence of a fetus, skeletal remains of a fetus that was found inside the pelvis of a woman. So this verified that, yes, pregnant women had been killed. Okay, so again, for our purposes, we're going to spend the whole first part of the class dealing with physical anthropology. Okay, another subdiscipline, linguistics. How do anthropologists study language? Out of all the subdisciplines of anthropology, we're going to spend the least time on language, but we'll talk about it now. So how do anthropologists study language? Get a variety of answers. Here's a little joke. Any persons except players caught collecting golf balls in this course will be prosecuted and have their balls removed. Okay, and I'm going to go through each one of these, but basically the way that anthropologists study language, because there is a whole separate subdiscipline called linguistics, but the way anthropologists would look at language is they'd look at the relationship between language and culture, how it affects our social life, how it shapes cognition, and that should be thought, and it's a tool to determine the origin and migration of snow. Okay, if you think of the Eskimos, how many words do Eskimos have for snow? Well, if you don't know, it's about 37. How many words do we have for snow? 2 or 3, maybe. What does that tell us about the importance of snow for Eskimos? Obviously, much more important to them than to us. Okay, so that's one way that anthropologists could tell what's important to people by looking at their languages. Okay, so can you think of things that we have a lot of words for that if somebody from another culture came and looked at our language, they'd say, oh yeah, this is really important. I like money. I like automobiles. How many words do we have for automobiles? Make, model, year. Are cars in our culture just about transportation? Of course not. Okay, another thing that anthropologists would look at, body language. Is this sign universal in all cultures? If this were a cultural anthropology class, we could do a whole unit on body language and cross-cultural signs that insult people, but I think you get the picture. And not everyone knows this sign, so you have to be careful, because sometimes we do signs like thumbs up that could be obscene in another culture. Okay, This Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, if you've never heard about it, it has to do with language and cognition. So basically, the premise is Sapir and Whorf looked at the Navajo language. And what they realized was that the Navajo only had one word for all the blues and all the green colors. So the question is, if they only have one word for all the blues and the greens, do they only see one color? Meaning that, does language shape thought, or does thought shape language, meaning that, if we go into a paint store, we see all different kinds of blues and greens, and there's tons of names for them. Does that come from our thoughts? Basically, there's no right or wrong answer to this. And the way that we're going to look at language the most, we're going to look at language a few ways. We're going to look at how we as a species, when and how we developed language, because there's a lot of controversy over when we actually were able to talk to one another. And then the other thing that we will look at is languages in different cultures, written language, and understand that sometimes we can tell where people came from by looking at their linguistic roots. This is true of the Alaska Natives. Sometimes we see ties to Asiatic origins, and sometimes you can actually tell how long two groups have been next to each other, or how long they've been separated if there's no overlap in the languages.